Hello and welcome back to Let's Talk More on Monday. I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and today we are continuing our Issue 10 Influence Contributor Chat series. So every time we publish a magazine, we have the contributors sit down with us and talk about their pieces, what went on behind the scenes, how it all came together, and what those pieces mean to them. So thank you so much for joining us for another round of contributor chats. We have Alabhya Prasad here with us today, and Alabhya is a special contributor because you were also an intern this semester. So welcome, Alabhya.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chloe. My name is Alabhya Prasad, and I am an undergraduate honors student at the IU Indianapolis Kelley School of Business, and I am a current intern at More Magazine. I typically work on the email campaign, so I'm writing communications as well as social media, and I'm pursuing double degrees in marketing and business management. I'm so excited to be on here today and to speak with all of you about my piece and Issue X.
Yes, we are so happy to have you and slay with the double major.
It's a nice blend.
Yeah, it's a great combo for sure.
Mm.
So you wrote an absolutely beautiful piece in Issue 10 Influence, and I would love to talk about it. So for our listeners who haven't had a chance to get their copy of Issue X or haven't checked out our website, which you should totally go do that. But if they haven't, tell us a little bit about your piece. What's it all about?
Yeah, so my piece, Invincible, explores a variety of topics from personal empowerment and also just how society kind of shapes our identity and our perceptions of our strength and expectations, as well as like the challenge of, trying to defy them as an individual. This piece is really personal to me as it kind of reflects my own experiences being a South Asian woman growing up in a predominantly white community and all the forces that kind of shaped my sense of identity. And it also exemplifies how I tried to navigate certain pressures, whether it be internal or external, and then how I found a form of resilience within them and how it became something so powerful at the end of my story, because for the longest time I tried to be somebody that I wasn't. I tried to conform to society's expectations and just trying to fit in, but at the end of the day you have to be authentic, you have to be genuinely comfortable with yourself. So that this piece kind of is my story that I take back. I reclaim my story and my identity. So
Yeah, it's so great. And I really feel like you accomplished that mission of, the message. So take us a little bit behind the scenes. How did this article come to be?
oh yeah, okay, so this piece kind of was an inspiration or kind of stemmed from my own experiences. Obviously, growing up, I experienced bullying. I was excluded from certain groups throughout elementary, middle, and high school. And then that kind of gave me a personal identity crisis. And I was just trying to find where I belonged. How do I belong? And what do I have to do in order to feel like I belong in,
Right.
society, in school, at home, or just any certain like social situation. And by observing my challenges firsthand, along with also just talking to other peers who might have experienced similar perspectives and also just experiences, it took me to reflect on both like the cultural constructs and also just how they kind of explored their identity and how I would in years to come. So this exploration kind of helped me dive into like the complexities of resilience, of belonging, and also just how do I define myself and my identity.
Amazing. And you were you already interning for More when you agreed to be a contributor? How did that conversation happen?
Yeah, so yes, I was an intern, and I think Ariana reached out to me, asking because I told her during our mentor meetings I love writing. I've always enjoyed it. It's been a passion. Every time I'm stressed, I kind of put all my thoughts to pen and paper.
Yeah.
And I told her that, if given the opportunity, I would love to share somebody else's story, like interview them and share their story, or then, just write about my own experiences being a South Asian woman and just growing up in like a certain or difficult situation. And
Mhm.
she's like, "Yeah, we have issue X coming up. You could totally write it." And I was like, "Whoa, that's amazing," because it kind of checks off two of my bucket lists things. It's one to be a published writer, and then second to be in a magazine. And with Ariana, I was able to accomplish that. So like I'm like so grateful for her and just the interns that made my story and piece come to life.
Mhm.
Like it was so beautiful.
Yeah, it really came together in the best way, I think. And I think it shows that you have some experience writing about your feelings. You can tell. When I got into this piece before issue 10 was officially published, I go through and read for, grammar and too many commas or not enough commas. And I really didn't have much to do with your article. I read it and I was like, well, that's ready for print. So
Yeah, I went through I think I had like 6 drafts all in multiple docs, so, like, the final doc was not even, like, where you could see my old revisions and stuff. Because I was like, "I don't know if this piece is a true reflection of, like, my experiences." Like, there's so much that goes into somebody's story, and how do you
right.
make sure that it's not just, like, something superficial? How can people relate to this at the end of the day?
Yeah. Well, congratulations on checking those things off your bucket list. I'm sure it is the first of many times that you will be published for your work. And, you had a hand in a lot of the other parts as well. So issue 10 could not have happened without the interns, and you guys did a great job.
Definitely.
So let's talk a bit about the internship program itself. This was your first semester interning with More.
Mhm.
How did you come to be an intern with More?
Yeah, so I reached out to one of the previous interns from the last semester. Her name is Mackenzie, and I sat down with her and got insight about the internship. And then after I talked to her, I applied. Then had my interview with Ariana, and I just love the mission of More. Being able to share stories of underrepresented groups and having the opportunity to just continue to share those stories in any way, any format, any medium. That kind of like in high school, I didn't have any of this. Like I felt like an outsider. So now being able to share these stories and also being able to tell my story, it was something so beautiful. And then I sat with Julie, who's a current intern, lead intern, and like she shared her experiences, and I was like, I want to take part. I want to be a part of sharing these stories and just helping push that narrative. Like we all belong. We all have certain things that we can share and tell, and all of our experiences matter.
Yeah, absolutely. And what has been the best part about your internship?
Ooh. I think it's trying to like finding that group of women that have like that same mindset and goal of like, we all can do things together, and it doesn't have to be like super competitive in nature. Like we can support each other in all of our goals, and just finding that community that I didn't have growing up because everything was so toxic and competitive. I
Right.
finally found like I can belong and I can be myself without discomfort.
That's amazing. There is some kind of inherent community when you work on something like this, artistic and meaningful to other people. Obviously, you're going to meet people that have the same ideology, and
Mhm.
then you have that connection for however long you decide to foster it. But there's also a community for when you become published and people read your work and they see themselves in it. Have you experienced any kind of feedback from the audience? Has anyone reached out to you about your piece?
I had one of my friends here in college. She reached out to me, and she was like, "Thank you for sharing your story because with the certain situation around the world right now and everything, it just feels like everything has been zoned out and just stories can't be shared as openly." And I
Right.
think I took a risk honestly because I was scared of judgment from my own community. Even though I didn't mention any names or anything, I just felt like if I shared my story, would I receive backlash for it? Would people say, "Oh, so many other people also have that same experience. So why are you putting it to pen? Why are you publicly displaying it? Why
Yeah.
didn't you just grow up and figure it out like the rest of us did?" So her words kind of reassured me, saying like, no, there's people that care and will care about your story and what you have to say. And as long as you take that, you take their words, you should be fine. And
Right.
you find comfort with sharing your story, which I don't think anybody should ever feel frightened to share their story.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that is just kind of a sign of the times. sometimes people don't feel entirely safe, especially if their story has some controversial points to it. But that does bring up an interesting aspect of this. And you mentioned that you've had like, 5 or 6 drafts of your article. Was there anything that didn't make the final version that you felt like maybe you shouldn't share?
Um, okay, so my sister, my older sister, who is 3 years older than me, she is kind of a big influence on my writing. Ever since I took like AP Language and Composition, AP Literature and Composition in high school, she kind of shaped my identity, and I don't mention her once in my story, which I was like, maybe this is a choice that I'm making, because without her, I feel like my story just makes no sense. But at the same time, it does, because I don't want her experiences with me to kind of shape how I write my piece or how I structure it, because I can finally take ownership of my story and how I wanted or how I experienced it authentically, instead of having like another side character in a way. Sorry, Anushka, if you're watching this. But
Well, I mean, you made your point. Like this piece was about you and
yes,
your journey and how the world has influenced you. And if you introduced your sister's influence into it, suddenly, it's a different thing.
exactly. Yes. Yeah. It'd be like influence of Anushka and Alabhya instead of just influence of Alabhya and her experiences. And despite not choosing it, I think with my personal journey, I was able to share how I interpreted my own identity in my own terms, rather than, like you mentioned, the influence of someone else. And I think that choice kind of helped me embrace my individuality even more than, you know, times before throughout the whole writing process within my 5 to 6 drafts.
Yeah. So when you were finally done with it and you submitted the piece, there was a little discussion. Not everybody had a title nailed down when we were going to print. And when I read your piece, we had talked about the title of Invincible, and then that ended up becoming the final title. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so my name, Alabhya, means one who is invincible. And I think with the story being about me and like experiencing racism and stuff, like no matter how many times I experience something just discomforting,
Mhm.
I always found a way to be tenacious and resilient. Never I never closed down on myself, and I think an invincible individual is somebody that can remain resilient in times of discomfort and hardship, no matter what. And I think that title, it just summarized my piece so well, and
Yeah.
it's so creative too to use my meaning of my name with the story that I tell, being able to just be the
Yeah.
header, be the title.
That was just the bow that it needed on top.
Yes,
And
definitely.
of course, there is a visual element as well.
Mhm.
For people who have been following us for a long time, every piece comes with an artistic journey as well, some kind of photo shoot or visual journey that we put together that, it takes us on. And this one I think is especially meaningful because it's mostly you and sometimes it's little you, which is so precious. But tell us a little bit about how you chose those photos for your piece, or if you just had a hand in it, maybe.
Yeah, honestly, I when it came to those pictures, it was my photographer that I worked with, Gabriella, who's a student at Butler University. She did an absolutely phenomenal job at capturing the essence of my piece. I actually did not choose any of the photos myself. She already
Oh,
had a plan in mind by reading my piece, and I just kind of followed along with it. When
nice.
we first met to take pictures, Gabriella like had the clear vision. Like she's like, "We're gonna go to this room, and Kelly, and we're gonna take this picture with you sitting, and we're gonna have you standing in the middle of a hallway as people walk by." And I'm like, "Okay, that's a little uncomfortable. That's okay. I trust you. I simply just trusted her with everything, and I simply tagged along. She saw
Yeah.
my story and like the vision of my story before I even had a chance to like read it and see like, oh, maybe I want a picture of this. And like each image was intended to evoke like some sort of response, and I think she did a beautiful job with both complementing my narrative and the exploration of the themes within my piece, which is strength, vulnerability, and identity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you are listening to this, fantastic job. Thank you so much for your contribution, Gabriella.
Mhm.
Well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Let's Talk More on Monday. But if you're listening, please make sure to join us on Patreon. We're going to dig deeper with Alabhya about the piece and some of the things that we discussed in this. We're just going to get down into the nitty gritty. So join us over there. But before we go, is there any way that you would like our listeners to find you outside of this space?
Yeah, you can follow my LinkedIn, which can be found in the email campaigns that are sent on Mondays, as
Period.
well as following my Instagram if you'd like at Alabhya_Prasad.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about your piece, Invincible. And thank you for listening. We so appreciate everyone who listens to the podcast and lets us know if they like it. Leave us a comment, send us an email, and hopefully we'll see you over on Patreon where we dig deeper with all of our friends. So join us again next week when we talk with another contributor. And thanks so much for joining us today, Alabhya.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.